this is Bethany. Welcome to the Birth and Body podcast. I'm super excited about our guest today. She is a birth and postpartum doula, a school counselor by day, and a therapist in training by night, and I'm sure all the hours studying and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to the show, Ciara.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you. We're going to talk all things mostly postpartum and just those kind of transitions. So thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. It's a pleasure. Anything for you.
You're so sweet. I just love you. So I originally just thought I need to have Ciara on the show because I feel like you obviously work with, transition with kids growing up, kind of coming of age stuff, and then seeing often couples turn into parents and all these transitions. I know you work with couples as a therapist in training, sometimes individuals. So it's just a lot of change, which can be really, of course, challenging. I often see as a midwife, people being really challenged and really stressed by the changes in their life and their marriage and their body and everything.
All of it.
So, gosh, where do we even start? So how did you end up where you are?
Oh, you knew to ask that question? I ended up where I am because of you. Honestly. I tell people that all the time. Did you really? Oh, that hurts my heart.
No, I remember that you gave me a gift card after, and I was like, I like her, but I
forgot what the conversation probably was about.
Yes.
It was literally about how to get into the birth world.
Okay. Well, how did you even get interested in
I was about to say, it started a little bit before you, but, you pretty much were the icing on top of the cake. When I was younger, my mom and I used to watch A Baby Story on TLC all the time. It was like our Saturday morning ritual. I was probably, 6 or 7 when this was on, if not a little bit older, but that was what we did. Okay. And so I was always interested in really what my desire was. I just want to be in the room. And by that point, my sisters had a couple of babies. I have a couple of sisters, but they had babies, and I was able to be in the room at one point, and then I was like, this is what I'm going to do in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
But then I went to college, and that biology track for pre-med didn't work out. Okay. So I graduated with my bachelor's in psychology, and I was still yearning to be in the room. Like, I couldn't shake it. And then Eve Ensler's vagina monologues didn't help.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
It did not help. So, anyway, I finished my psychology degree at Spelman, and then I came back home, and I was like, I still want to do this. And I believe all I did was just kind of research midwifery at the time, because I was still trying to be an OBGYN, and that's when I reached out to you. Okay. And you pretty much told me, no, don't do that first. Go be a doula first, and then make sure you understand how to be on call, what that feels like, what that looks like. And from there, it was pretty much like love at first sight. Like, yep, this is what I want to do right here. Awesome. So I still might pursue midwifery, but right now I'm good where I am.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So how did you always wanted to be in the birth room? How did you kind of start adding the counseling piece? Because now I know you're in grad school too. I feel like kind of the midwives are often counselors in a way. Yeah. So it's kind of a similar hat, but still different.
It is a little bit because, to answer your first question, my mother has always been a very strong influence in my life, and she started her grad program. She's going to be a marriage and family therapist, and as I was kind of seeing what her coursework was, I just was like, you know what, I'm going to pursue it. And it just happened to align with my passion for couples and just people and their issues of life, and just growing through all the stages of life, and not feeling alone during that process, because transitions can be debilitating. Yeah, they really can. And on the one hand, midwives or just providers in general, they do support couples in an aspect, but for the most part, they're focused on the medical part, development, and it's not always possibly taught in training what the mental health part looks like. And so I wanted to do my due diligence to know what that looks like too, what to look out for, what can trigger some of these things. Honestly, what are some of the good questions to ask? That's really what my training has been about.
Sure.
What questions do we ask here according to, this particular psychologist?
Sure.
And it just helps to get those questions flowing.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I think if I were to do things over, I would be so tempted to become an LPC. So I just think, I think it's like root level healing, I think, is often in people's emotions. So, and just I think as a midwife, I realize, we go over nutrition and different things and how often I see just a wall come up and I can't quite get there in my role as a midwife, whatever it is, if it's an eating disorder or emotional eating. Certainly there's many more things than just those. But, often I can only get so far as a midwife. So.
And as I hate to say civilian, but as a non-practicing clinician, that was always a frustration of mine.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times in my training, not a lot of times, but early in my training, they would ask, why did you want to be a psychologist or a therapist? And they'd say, a lot of people would say, well, I've always been that friend that people come to. And as a midwife, essentially, in that part of their life, you're that friend that they come to.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
As the friend, you can't go as far, like you're saying, as a trained person can. And that's a lot of times, too, what I tell my postpartum couples is just, it's great to have someone who surrounds, or not someone, but people who surround you and can support you. But there's nothing like someone who just knows exactly what you're going through.
Right.
So it's very different.
Yeah. So for those who might not know, I often talk about doulas on the show, but often people have an idea. They kind of get what a birth doula is, but most people don't know what postpartum doulas are. Okay. So could you tell us a little bit what that looks like?
Yes.
It can look like so many things depending on what the family needs. So
one way that a postpartum doula is described is a mother for the mother. And typically that helps people get it. But even further than that, it's a postpartum doula is like a protective layer, in my opinion, for the couple, not just the mom, because mom, although, she just went through this hard thing, people typically tend to gravitate toward, what do you need? What do you need? How can I help? Are you okay? Calling and checking in, at least early on. It may trail off a little bit later, but at least early on, she has lots of support. And what I find is that a lot of the husbands or the fathers don't have that same checking in. They don't have those kinds of relationships of people who are genuinely looking out for how they're transitioning through this period. Mom's pretty focused on other things, and she may be very sensitive to how you treat her, but not so much how he is as a person. And then definitely the idea of them as a couple can easily get lost while they're nurturing the baby. So a postpartum doula, honestly, is just that protective layer to make sure that all parties involved, the younger children, the new baby, the mom, the dad, they remain as a unit.
Sure.
So that can look like making meals. That can look like, holding the baby while mom and dad get cleaned up and, they have their conversation. I a lot of times will encourage my clients, you need to hug for like 45 seconds tonight. Just hug. I will hold the baby for 45 seconds. Go hug. Just to get some of those good chemicals that we want out, and just reminding them of what they did this, like of who did this, really, not so much what, but who did this. It can also be sometimes, cleaning for them or helping to prepare meals. If I'm early in their prenatal period, I can come over and, help prepare meals that they'll need once they deliver. It can be a plethora of things.
Sure. That's awesome. So as you're working with families in that capacity, another reason why I wanted to have you on the show is just maybe the things you broach as far as their mental health. Like, how do you do that? What does that look like for different families? Maybe for families planning their first baby, kind of what's normal, what's not.
Yeah.
That's a lot of questions.
No. But it all goes together. It's wrapped in a beautiful Bethany bow. It's all good. Early on in our conversation with, or in my conversation with couples, I like to do on my intake forms, I always like to ask questions that will give me clues pertaining to mental health. So have you experienced this in your family that you know of? Have you experienced this individually? Is this a pattern that you may find? Do you often find that when you're stressed out, you do these things like the eating, or you don't eat, or you stay at work longer and you just avoid things? So then when challenges or conflicts come, postpartum, then you're more likely to go within, and then we want to look for depressive symptoms or things like that. But I try to get as many clues up front as possible. As much as a couple or a client is open with me, I like to take all those clues.
Sure.
And then as we go throughout our relationship, it really just looks like regular check-ins. Are you eating? Are you, still trying to maintain some sense of a schedule even while you're pregnant? Because sometimes people are like, I'm pregnant, I don't want to do anything. Well, let's, try to maintain some sense of normalcy and not allow this period to just kind of overwhelm you. Because that's really what the root can sometimes be, is they're just overwhelmed and they don't know how to manage the difference of hormones and how to manage the difference in relationships and all those things, their body, all that. So a lot of times postpartum, I'm pretty familiar and aware of that person and that couple and how that unit kind of works, especially if they have other children. I'm familiar with, who takes what responsibility and what role. And I can be mindful of what changing roles will look like when they go postpartum. So a lot of times it's really just being observant and really trying to forge that relationship with them. Like I said, prenatally, I've always asked those questions. Postpartum. Oh, and then that's another thing. I have a separate intake form for my birth clients and my postpartum clients. My postpartum clients, I want to know, how long are you taking off from work? That's a big question for me. The other thing that I ask them is, what are your expectations for your postpartum period, for your birth and for your partner? If you don't have, an idea of what you want those to look like, then if anything should happen, it can be very easy to, for them to just kind of unravel from that point. Like, this is not how I wanted it. Well, let's talk about how did you want it up front? So that I can, as your doula, help again to protect that environment for you. And then the question about the partner is golden, especially if partner is there. Oh, I love it when they can hear, this is what I want you to do.
Sure.
And then, maybe they have a late night conversation by themselves. Well, I may not be comfortable doing this, or this may be too much, especially if there's other children. So maybe we should have more family involved or whatever, not just the postpartum doula and myself, but other people. Yeah. And it can just spark good conversations. Yeah. So that's how I screen for mental health things. Yeah.
Like facilitating those conversations. It's simple, but often doesn't happen.
Yeah.
100%. We all know.
Yes. People don't like to talk. Yeah. I mean, they really don't. They don't like to talk about the vulnerable
that's exactly the word I was thinking.
Yes, people don't like to be vulnerable
it's
at
scary.
All. Yes, it is very, very scary. And even something as simple as our desires and our wants, when you say it, it gives someone else the opportunity to possibly say, no, I can't do that. And then you're left feeling possibly rejected or isolated, or, feelings of, worthlessness is also one that is such a harsh word, but it's one that a lot of people feel. And when you call it out, they're like, yes, I feel you're giving birth. You've given birth if you have other children. And it's sometimes just reinforcing those good things that they can literally visibly see. I have done a hard thing multiple times. That helps them to kind of reel it on back in.
Sure.
And just, like I said, having that conversation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you facilitate those conversations, and then when you start to see some things, I'm like, is that a yellow flag?
Mm-hmm.
How does that go in your role as a doula,
Mm-hmm.
and then therapist in training? I'm sure there's some overlap.
Oh, yeah.
Which may be helpful, but
Yes.
also hard.
Yes.
So how does that work?
It's hard to stick within my student realm, knowing clinically possibly, or it's hard to stick within my student realm, knowing almost professionally what is happening, but not having that licensure to say, this is what's probably happening. Let's work through it this way. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I tend to look at is the Gottman kind of model of family dynamics, and especially life after baby. That is a big thing that I do like to reference. Just how are we, that's kind of what structures my postpartum.
Okay.
Is just how are we going to transition through this? How are we going to, again, maintain that unit? But when I figure out what a yellow flag is, depending on, like I said, if I know the family or not, how long I've been with them, I can pick up on those yellow flags. And often it's just, a referral. Especially if it's a reoccurring flag. Mm-hmm. And if it's a reoccurring yellow flag, the first couple times we may try to talk about it. I may, call them when I know that they're possibly by themselves, or they're, able to get some time to themselves. I'm checking in. How are you doing? What's going on with this? I noticed this when I was at the house the other day. Is that typically, what happens with you guys, or for you? Is that often something that you experience? How often have you been experiencing that?
Right.
It really starts off as a conversation so that I can really be able to say, okay, maybe we should think about some referrals in the area. Are you comfortable with that?
Sure.
So,
sure, yeah. Totally. So I know for me, often when I refer, it can be hard for many people to hear for many different reasons. And that step from knowing someone is there that could help to calling them and then going, that's a lot of steps for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
So we could talk about this for 5 podcasts. How, why do you think that is?
That people find it hard to follow through with the referral that you give them?
What do you think are the barriers? Obviously, financial is one of them.
Big barrier.
If that is not, I think a lot of people experience shame by even thinking, maybe there's something wrong with me. Why do I need to go to a counselor? I just need to figure it out and stuff it. That's what I most often see. And I think for me, it's hard to know, what do I say?
Yeah.
Besides, everyone needs a counselor. No one actually believes that.
Yeah. People are trying. The more people that, go get counseling, they're kind of bringing it back to the village saying, hey, you should probably try this.
True.
But it's not enough people going out to seek it for other people to say, oh, this puts to death all of the other things that I thought. And I think that's another thing that keeps people out of the office, is just their preconceived notions. We talked about this a little earlier, but people have this idea that it's going to be one, dramatic ordeal. And a lot of times it's not. Therapy is what you bring to the table. I will say, if you have an extensive history of mental health issues, then therapy could be a little bit more intense, but it is still what you bring to the table. We need to be a little bit more intense so we can deal with some of those issues that you have that, are attached to all of your family members. But if it's not that severe, therapy is very mild. It's just a weekly scheduled conversation with someone who is trained to notice the red flags, the black flags, if you will.
Sure.
Other people around you can notice the red ones. Clinically, professionally trained therapists will notice the black ones that you may stuff or hide, that you're not willing to tell your spouse. the ones that your girlfriends may not know about. I mean, the ones that you just deal with personally. And that's the conversation we need to have is what are you dealing with personally? Not who are you, when you're out to eat, or not who are you when you're over at family's house. Who are you when you're by yourself?
Yeah. That's a great way of putting that.
Yeah. That's who shows up in motherhood is who you are by yourself. Yeah. And that's also a very scary thing for some mothers to think about, which is why I do try to encourage as many couples as possible to seek help and seek it early. If mom is noticing any hesitation about being a parent, just go get some help.
What do you think that looks like, hesitation to be a parent? Or feels like?
Yeah, I was about to say, it's not so much am I going to do this right? But my mom was this way to me when I was a young person. I don't want to do this to my child. But I find myself doing it to my spouse, or I find myself doing it to other family members in my home. I don't want to do this to my newborn. Yeah. And even just saying, I felt this or I experienced this and I don't want to do the same thing. That's enough cause for me to say, okay, we should probably go talk about whatever that is. Yeah. Because it can stifle you beyond caring for your baby. It can stifle you as you try to transition back into real life, not real life, but your own individual life, one that's fulfilling for you. Yeah. So, yeah, I try to catch that early, but it also comes with lots of reinforcement. Like, you're not who you came from. You may share aspects of what they've dealt with, or you may have, remnants of what was done to you, but you're not that person. Right. There is an opportunity to get some of that off of you so that you can be exactly the parent that you want to be.
Yeah. For someone who is like, well, I just vent to my girlfriends, I'm good. What do you say to that? I hear this all the time.
Do you really?
All the time.
Oh, man.
I'm like, I am not enough as your girlfriend. Please go. How many times and ways do I have to say this? Yeah.
Yeah. And you might have to say it a lot, but for me, I say, well, let me meet your girlfriends. If your girlfriends are willing to be challenging, and if they themselves are comfortable with confrontation, and people have a bad connotation about that word. Confrontation is not, Real Housewives. That's not confrontation. That is another word. But confrontation is just confronting what needs to be addressed. And if you have friends that confront things and are willing to do that often, are willing to call you on your stuff, that's what you want. Those are the kind of people you want. I also ask, not so much but if they're willing to, if it gets to this point, do you write anything down? Do you draw? Do you sew? What do you do when you get stressed out or overwhelmed? Who's the first person that you turn to? And I want to meet that source of healing for you, or that outlet for you, so that we can make sure that it's a comprehensive outlet, that it's able to address some of the things that you have inside and get it out. That's all therapy really is about. Just getting out what's inside. That's it.
Yeah. And sometimes it is like someone who just asks really good questions. Not all friends are, of course, that way. Yeah. Unfortunately, most aren't. But
yeah. If they're good at asking questions, like I said, and if they're good with confronting the issue, I trust and believe that person will probably be, better off than someone who may not have that kind of support system. No,
it's awesome. So another thing I wanted to ask you, transition in general can be hard no matter what. And then when you might add something like postpartum depression or anxiety, postpartum rage is something not a lot of people have heard about. Can you talk a little bit about those? What do those look like for people to know, like warning signs? What is normal? Postpartum blues versus this is not.
I was about to say. So postpartum psychiatric illnesses, they do lie on a continuum from, mild to severe. And the first one being postpartum blues, we'll just kind of go over them.
Yeah.
Postpartum blues is one that honestly I try to just say is normal. It doesn't happen in everybody, but it does happen in up to about 85% of people is what research is showing right now. So that's something that people should just kind of expect. You may feel, a little fatigued. You may feel a little overwhelmed. You may be more teary than you are often. You may be tired and, all those things just because your body is adjusting to the new normal. It's not going to go back to the way that it was. It's going to adjust to this new normal as, baby cries, your body's working. You may be more hungry too, or not as hungry. So things like that can just change. But, the next one would probably be postpartum depression. And that one doesn't happen in many people either, but it is more common than the more severe one, which is postpartum psychosis, which is more so probably that rage that you were talking about. But postpartum depression is one that is, like I said, more common than psychosis, but not as common as the blues. And it just looks like that one is a little bit more difficult to identify because it does look like clinical depression. But I think the biggest difference is that it's onset by delivery, by giving birth. So if you have never had depression in your life and you just gave birth, and your symptoms are more severe than I'm tired for, a couple of weeks and I've been able to adjust. If you're tired and you're restless and you're fatigued and you're, like I said, teary for longer than the first couple of weeks, it's likely that you are experiencing some of those symptoms of depression. And then psychosis is the more severe one, but it's one that needs to be talked about because this one is where, hallucinations can happen in mom, kind of taunting her to harm herself or her baby. And as dramatic as that is, that's just as dramatic as the symptoms of psychosis appear. They appear rapidly, like within the first 48 to 72 hours postpartum. So it's a little bit easier in a sense to catch because, like I said, of its dramatic presentation, but it's one that as more people are giving birth at home and at birth centers, they may not be able to catch because, as we know, in the hospitals, they do keep you a little bit longer. So postpartum psychosis could go undetected by your provider, if you're caring at home or at the birth center. But it's one that if you just kind of talk to someone about just talk about it. Hey, I don't really want to hold my baby. As mild as that is for some people, it can be a little bit more to that. Okay, why don't you want to hold your baby? Well, I was thinking that blah, blah, blah could happen. And that is where you want to say, all right, that's when we need to go ahead and refer.
100%.
If it's just, I'm, tired or, I've been touched all day by multiple children, by my husband, by clothes, then that's a little bit different. But if it's the other, then we definitely want to seek some help with that. For
sure. Yeah, and I know we talked a little bit ahead of time. I always have clients do a postpartum plan like they do a birth plan. And some of the things that are on there are like, who are 3 people where you can tell them anything.
Yes.
And they're not going to judge you. So I think that's a huge part of potentially not catching postpartum psychosis is, do you have someone where you can say, I thought this.
Yes.
And they're not going to freak out. And they're going to listen.
Right. Yes.
And hopefully help you find the right person to talk to. There's a bunch of other stuff on the postpartum plan too. And I've found it really helpful for families to have a little bit more realistic picture of postpartum and more tools. Definitely not as comprehensive as hiring you. So I think everyone should hire you. But at least starts getting the conversation going and has like postpartum doula, list and stuff on there. But
agreed. That's number one. Can you talk to anybody around you? And can you be, again, vulnerable and transparent with them about the things that only you know? Because verbalizing what only we know is very difficult. Like I'm about to inform someone who maybe has not had the same experience, but What are they going to say? How are they going to treat me? How are they going to respond? And that can probably be another debilitating kind of thought process. And I don't want to talk to anybody about this. So a postpartum doula, especially if you establish a relationship with your doula prenatally, one that you're able to kind of grow into comfort and know that this person has been certified and trained to support you through whatever happens. Like birth, it's so unpredictable in so many aspects, but postpartum is more unpredictable because you add on the aspect of real life. Like we're back in real life. You may not feel inclined to eat all of the cravings that you have because of other reasons, but can you talk to me? Can you share with me your true intimate thoughts that, you were afraid of yourself? And if you can, then that's when a doula knows that they've done a great job.
Yeah, 100%. So I started out as a doula. I don't know if everybody knows that. Before I was a midwife. And it is so gratifying just doing the emotional, physical, just focusing on that relationship is incredibly powerful with a person and relying on them for support. Yeah. Well, what else should I be asking you?
What else should you be asking me? Let's see. I know I've talked about some of this as far as how a doula can protect that protective layer, but more specifically, some of the things that I like to recommend specifically for certain things. So going in more detail, for people that may be dealing with their body image after they've given birth, belly bind, plan to get belly binded. I didn't know the benefits of it until very recently. And then it clicked in my head. Oh, this is healing body image postpartum. Like, let's go ahead and reinforce this. Let's endorse this. Because even though belly binders may not be able to bind you until about 6 or so weeks after you've given birth, having that date on the calendar can help you deal with the physical limitations of healing after birth. And you're like, okay, I don't have to feel like I need to go to Orange Theory at 5 a.m. while I didn't get sleep last night because my child wasn't sleeping, but I need to get my body in order. Well, a belly binder can help you to kind of tighten up those abdominal muscles and get things back to a working normal while you're healing.
That's a good point. Yeah. I have never heard it put that way. Like we talk about the benefits, but not just mentally having, the date. That's such a good idea.
It's almost like, well, this could be maybe just a personal example, but I think it works maybe.
Sure.
It's almost like scheduling a massage.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're going to get release and you're going to get help for whatever is ailing you physically, it kind of helps you possibly deal with some of the stressors that are coming up, before that appointment. Like, 100%. Okay, I'm getting a massage. I don't need to add any more tension to my body.
Right.
Let me just deal with what's going on and just face it.
That's so true.
The other thing that I like to recommend is eating a rainbow diet. And when I say rainbow, I mean like all of the vegetables that are of different colors, as well as your proteins and your nutrient-rich food items in your food groups. There is a aided kind of response when we eat what we want. Like if I'm craving something, just eat it. Don't feel super bad about it afterward, but just eat it if you're wanting it. But also know that sometimes if we're craving one thing, that means our body's really wanting another. Totally. So, err on the side of what makes me feel happy today.
Sure.
The other thing that I typically will recommend, like I said, on top of hiring a doula, that's number one, hire your family.
Yeah.
If you have a summer birth or even a birth around the holidays, and you have, a younger niece or nephew or a younger sibling who is off for breaks and they just, need maybe extra money, or they just love you so much that they want to be around your babies all the time.
Yeah.
You can hire them and I'll bet you they would not have any problem with it. And it gives you extra support at the house that you can afford. Yeah. 'Cause like we said, financial barriers are real and, it keeps people from getting that support. The other thing that I recommend is, I said this a couple of times, but, two things now that I'm thinking about it. one thing, of course, is maintaining that connection with their partner and scheduling check-ins to be vulnerable. You were vulnerable to a certain extent before you guys stepped into this, partnership and parenthood and all of that. There was something that got you here. So try to maintain that at least 2 to 3 times a week. And if you have a doula, that would be the time that they're holding baby and you guys are in the bedroom talking or whatever you need to do. But intentionally scheduling those days can help. Yeah. Even if it's I'm breastfeeding at breakfast and, we're having our coffee or I'm just drinking waters, getting out of the bedroom sometimes because those walls can close in on you. But trying to maintain that connection in whatever way possible. The other thing that I thought of as I was talking was, and then I lost it.
I love that. Scheduling the check-ins.
Yeah, you have to schedule it because sometimes if it's not on the calendar, it ain't gonna happen.
It's not.
It's just
not in our fast pace.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing though was accepting the new closeness that comes from a newborn. I tell my couples or my clients all the time, your baby needs way more from you now than they needed when they were inside. Like, period. They're hands down, they need everything from you. And although it was a passive giving when they were inside, now it's an active giving where it's draining you more on every aspect, emotionally, mentally, physically. It's draining a lot out of you, but it's worth the drain.
Sure.
But to accept that drain is where people find it difficult, because that acceptance now comes with, I need help. And then we get to the vulnerability again, and people don't like asking for help.
Yeah.
So if you can accept the new give that's coming, the active giving that's happening after you give birth, it can make a world of a difference, because again, it goes back to that question on my intake form.
Yeah.
What are your expectations for your partner? And if one of your expectations is just give me water when I ask, or
sure,
rub my feet when I ask, that already kind of gets the conversation out of, I need help in some area.
Yeah, 100%.
So always remember to ask for help.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if someone wants to look into what you do for families, what does that look like? Can they just hire you for prenatal, just for postpartum? Like, what are those options?
They absolutely can. My website is www.mintedwell.com. Awesome. And on there I have birth, postpartum, and birth and postpartum packages. So a couple can hire me just for their birth, and then I check in on them after they've given birth, probably 2 times, just making sure breastfeeding's going well and all those kinds of things. And after that, I leave them to develop. Postpartumly, though, it's a little bit different, because we have a couple of conversations prenatally, but I'm not supporting them in that area. I'm just getting to know them, and they're getting to know me. But then when they call me and say, hey, I've delivered, then I come in and I'm literally like, Nanny McPhee, what do you need me to do?
Right. Yes.
And I do that for as long as they need me to do it for.
Yeah.
For as long as they've hired me. Yeah. And then, of course, the other package of birth and postpartum is a marriage of that.
Yeah.
So I am with them their whole time, and then beyond when they need me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, any other tips or anything you'd like to share?
Oh, man.
Or maybe if someone wants to become a postpartum or birth doula, anything you would want to tell them really quick that you maybe wish you would have known, or because sometimes I feel like navigating the field can be hard.
Yeah, it can be. I'm gonna say, because of my full-time job, I'm a little shielded from that. Like, I don't have to try that hard.
Okay.
Because honestly, I did a great job. I'm going to pat myself on the back. So that would probably be my tip. I did a great job of researching first and getting into those conversations with you.
Sure.
And then that kind of led to a relationship to build with, or that I built it with, the birth center.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yep. Yeah.
It just sounded weird. But, I'm able to, kind of support the moms that all of the midwives have at the birth center. And that helps with clientele. It helps with passively being able to market yourself because you've done the job of connecting with a person, and by word of mouth is typically the best marketing tool.
For sure. 100%. Yeah. Awesome.
That would be my tip.
Yeah. Take it slow. Do your research. Yeah.
Yes.
That's true. I see a lot of doulas, even myself somewhat, just jumping in and not having that plan.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard to plan when you're new to it, but the more you talk to people, it really helps.
Yeah.
Who have been doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. And the more you realize what a plan should look like. Like, don't make some lavish plan that, has never been done, because then you're trying to reinvent the wheel. And you don't have to do that.
Right.
You have a great support system wherever you are, I'm sure, of either, people who are looking to build clientele or people who have done a great job of being and are successful at that time. But yeah, they... on any scale, they can offer suggestions and guidance so that you're not wasting your time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ciara, for being on the show.
No problem.
Kind of late tonight, but I appreciate it.
It's a Friday night. I mean, I would rather be nowhere else than talking about birth with you.
Awesome. Well, I loved having you. So people can find you on Minted. Well, you're on Instagram.
I'm on Instagram as CC, so 2 letter C's, the birth doula.
Okay.
No, that's not right. That's my email. But my Instagram is CC the doula at, and then at Minted Well on Instagram as well. Okay. So my business is Minted Well. Personal is CC the doula. But
okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. No problem. This was fun.
Let us know what you want to hear about, and if you've made it all the way to the end, please leave us a review. We would so appreciate that. Share about it. You can find more updates and things like that on my Instagram or Facebook. It's at Bethany Stricker Midwifery on Instagram, Bethany Stricker Midwifery Care on Facebook, and then just BethanyStricker.com for website stuff. And make sure you subscribe on Spotify or Apple so you can get notifications for further podcasts. Thanks for listening. Bye.